presenter, Ashley Gaske. She operates Precision Hoof Care, a successful farrier practice in the Capital District, and she is been a good friend of CCE Equine since I've been here for a year. So thank you for all that you've done, Ashley, including this. She has been certified through the American Farriers Association, as well as being credentialed with the International Association of Professional Farriers. She has a thoroughbred and has a particular interest in thoroughbreds both on and off the track, which is great for the area that we're in. I believe you have a couple of your own that you've, three thoroughbreds. And she enjoys riding and catering to the whims of her rescued dogs and minis. So she can relate to many of us here tonight. So thank you, Ashley, for coming. I'm going to pull up your slideshow. Can everybody hear me okay? And can everyone see the slideshow?
Yes.
All right, great. And then I'm going to pull the chat up over here. Ashley, do you prefer to have a Q&A completely at the end, or would you, how we did it last week is people would put questions in the chat. I can see the chat and then I will like find a good place to kind of interrupt you and ask that question so you don't have to be trying to look at the chat.
Yeah, that's perfect. Is there any way, like right now I see the slideshow and I see you, is there any way I can see the slideshow and myself? Because like I have stuff, or is that not a thing?
You're on a phone and I don't do it on a phone a lot. I'm trying to see, I think I can pin your video. Did that change anything for you, or does that just change my screen?
No. That's fine. But so I hope you guys are going to be able, because I have cool little props. I have a freeze dried little foot.
I believe they can see you.
All right, cool. So if anything is off of the screen and or I have like a booger hanging out of my face, somebody tell me, okay? It's supposed to be funny. All right, cool. So like Brianna's amazing introduction, I'm Ashley. I accredited, credential, whatever you want to call it, through a couple of different organizations. I have a bachelor's in environmental law, and for the last 10 years, much to my family's disappointment, I have been fascinated with horse feet. And I think as I was a horse owner first, I was the little kid that grew up in a barn, and I think there's a lack of education in what farriers do or hoof care providers, whether your horse is barefoot or shod or whatever the case may be. So I would really like for horse owners to know a little bit more of what we do as farriers and what is going on the where the hair ends on their horses, with where the rubber meets the road, should we say, with their feet. And hopefully I can help give you guys a little bit of guidance, and definitely any questions you have while we're going, let me know. So do I change the slide? Do you change the slide? Okay, cool. So again, the goal is to help you be better prepared to care for your horse's feet. Kind of self-explanatory. So common basic anatomy. I don't know if you guys can see this as well. I'm operating on a phone, so I have a very small, I can't see what the slide says for sure. But kind of the bottom of your foot. So you're going to have your frogs, your collateral grooves are kind of these triangle things right here, your sole and your hoof wall. And this is, a foot that's been half untrimmed and half trimmed. So we can kind of see that, but just so we have our terminology, right? So we have our sole, our wall, our frog, our collateral grooves. Oh, that was not the right thing. There we go. Okay, so this would be just some, again, basic anatomy, how all your internal structures kind of line up. Like our wrist and their fetlock are very similar. So all the joints, so your wrist is this up here, and it's like the tip of your finger is your P3, your pedal bone, or whatever you want to call it. the bone inside one of the bones inside the horse's foot. So you have your, your coffin bone, P3, pedal bone, whatever you want to call it. You have your navicular bone, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of with horses with navicular issues or things like that. And why this bone is such an issue is it is a joint on all sides. So it's a little tiny triangle shaped bone, and it has an interface with your deep digital flexor tendon, your coffin joint, your P2, and your P3. So on all sides, it has to be perfect. And quite frankly, it very rarely is. So you get a lot of horses who end up with some sort of a navicular issue. And it's just a back part of the foot issue, to be diagnosed with by your veterinarian. So. Go ahead with that. Okay, cool. So some characteristics of a healthy foot. Again, I thought this was a kind of a good diagram because or a good visual. So I don't know if you guys can see there's some good, good smooth hoof wall, not a ton of cracks. It's not chipping. It's all kind of symmetrical. I'm trying to read my own thing here. Yeah, so there's versus, okay, so like this side, you have a ton of distortion, growth rings, things like that. Not, doesn't necessarily have to be pretty and shiny like that foot is that I, shined up and made beautiful for the presentation. But still you want to see something symmetrical with a reasonable amount of balance, because that balance is, that's how they interact with the ground. And if it's not appropriate, then, nothing above it can be correct either. So if we can. Perfect. Okay, so you guys might figure out through this presentation that I'm a little bit of a frog fanatic. So diseased frogs versus healthy frogs. I think of it kind of like a slice of pie in the foot, right? So we have it's this triangle wedge shaped, it's the soft tissue of the horse's foot. It should be a lot like the pad of a dog's foot. It should be tough and leathery and able to hit the ground without pain or anything like that. And to that end, a hoof pick is your best friend in terms of taking care of your horse's feet. And I see a lot of people are very, very tentative, very, very hesitant with their hoof pick. And you have to remember that this is a 900 to 1,500 pound animal that is theoretically capable of walking, trotting, galloping across rocks and pebbles and things like that. If you're going to hurt it with your little hoof pick, there's a bigger problem going on there. So please get in there, clean out your frogs, and we want them to be big, wide, nice size slices of pie in the foot. So if the whole foot's your pie, you don't want your Jenny Craig slice. You want a nice big slice of pie. So that's one of my peeves for sure. Okay, so characteristics of a healthy foot. Again, I went on about how symmetry is so important, and this is a foot of a horse that I work on that has very little that is straight or symmetrical or textbook correct about it. But the horse does very, very well and performs her job to the highest level available. So I don't want to put anybody down with, oh my goodness, my horse's feet are crooked. Sometimes it's all good, but you have to be aware of what correct is, so you can recognize something that's distorted or potentially also not correct. Okay, so effects of environment. It's a really big deal. And I don't think that prior to being a farrier, yes, right, mud and horses are synonymous, especially in the Northeast. It's wet, right? We've had a dry week this week, which has been lovely, but in general, we have mud, we have horses. However, if you take your foot and you saturate it, it's not good. So the foot, regardless, and actually this is kind of a cool study that came out a couple of years ago, regardless of how much water or moisture you can saturate this foot, soak it in water, the horse's hoof is 30% water. It just ends up being concentrated towards the center, towards that pedal bone. It can be 30% and very, very dry outer hoof wall, Or what happens a lot around here is your outer hoof wall and your sole become completely saturated, and the majority of your 30% of the foot, of your 30% of moisture in the foot is at the outer perimeter. And that is leaving your horses with something very wet and spongy to walk on. It, you know, I've had horses' feet that are, they're the texture of like that brown spot in an apple. And that's what that animal has to ambulate on, to get around, is on something that really doesn't have any good structure. So, you know, drying their feet out as much as possible is tremendous for it, encouraging good, healthy feet. Okay, so effects of environment. Yeah, it's everything I just said, basically. Horses that live in wet environments will require different hoof care than horses that live in dry environments. I do believe that, I don't know that my career would be as long if I was, you know, trying to, work and trim and shoe horses in a dry environment like New Mexico. I see those feet, and I've spent some time in different parts of California, and how dry and how hard they get and how sharp those people's knives have to be. And that's just not the case here. Like, you know, generally I do a lot of my trimming on the bottom of the foot with this little wire brush here. And that's all the kind of sole I really have to take out, because it is so wet. And we deal with that moisture content being much more to the exterior of the foot.
Hey, Ashley, we have a question. And it's, with all of the mud that we have, how do you recommend trying to keep your horse's feet as dry as possible?
I like to say that where there's a will, there's a way. You know, if you don't have anywhere dry for your horses to stand, you know, they can't be in a stall overnight, or they can't, you know, but can you stand them in your driveway while they eat a flake of hay? Pick their feet out, you know, scrub the mud off, pick their feet out, stand them in your driveway for a half an hour. Let them, just give them some opportunity to dry out. I mean, if that's the best you can do, that's the best you can do. Obviously put them in a lovely dry stall with bedding would be phenomenal, not always available to everybody. But that's kind of my thing. So, you know, and when they do have an opportunity to be dry, make sure their feet are clean and dry, and then put them in that dry space. So just bringing your horse in from a wet or muddy environment and putting them in a dry place, that's great, but let's take that opportunity to clean all their feet out as much as possible, and let them stand in something clean and dry for as long as possible. And I'm not saying that, you know, horses that are locked in stalls for days on end have you know, the healthiest feet. I think there is a happy medium there, but finding ways, I've seen people just, they have a field, but they put out a couple of stall mats, and on top of the stall mats, that's where they feed their hay. So the horses, and they can clean off the stall mats every day, so they stay on top of whatever the muddy environment may be. Sometimes you have to get a little bit creative with it. I don't have a fancy setup for my horses, so but I put in a dry lot, so they might live off the back of my garage, but I put in a dry area, because to me it was more important to give them dry ground than it was for me to build a fancy, you know, mahogany beautiful barn. And I think, like I said, you gotta find a way, and you gotta want it, and it sucks and it's hard, and it just never stops raining. Welcome to the Northeast. You're welcome. Oh, goodness. So I had originally given this presentation with somebody else. So we went back and forth on the slide. So I'm seeing these slides, and we're maybe repeating ourselves a little bit, but providing a dry area for a horse to stand in for even a short period of time can make a big, big difference. And it's also good for things like scratches and stuff like that. You know, you're good. Keep going. Yeah, so pick your horse's feet. Like I'm going to keep going back to my hoof pick. It's, you know, people ask, how do I help my horse behave for the farrier? How do I, you know, get rid of thrush? How do I? It's a hoof pick, guys. If you practice and get them comfortable with picking up their feet, and you practice and get them comfortable with having their feet picked out, you're going to notice when you're like, oh, hey, my horse's frog is looking different than it did before. And I think, you know, clean feet are healthy feet. So. Oh, in the event that you need to apply thrush treatment or any other medication, oh yeah, it'll be much more important if you do it to a clean, dry foot. That is something I see. I have like amazing, dedicated clients, and so very stereotypically, you know, thrush treatment is purple, right? I think I have some on my hand because that's farrier life. And what I see, I pick up their feet and they're like, I've been treating their thrush every day, which is amazing, and I so appreciate that. But they've ended up treating the dirt that's on top of the foot. Like you gotta get to the actual foot and treat it. And I promise you are not going to hurt them with a hoof pick. For everything I said before, they're, you know, 1,200 pounds and supposed to be able to gallop around on you know, questionable surfaces. So this is not a regular wire brush, but it very well can be. I think they're you can get them in the welding section at Tractor Supply for about $8. And duct tape a hoof pick to it, which is legitimately what I have in my tech box. This is my fancy farrier version that I paid a little bit more for. So, okay, so keep it simple hoof care. This is a big thing for me. And it's, again, I can only give my personal experiences and my personal advice is, you know, so this was a picture I took at the SmartPack store in Massachusetts. There's this whole wall of amazing hoof products, right? And what do I tell people to use? A hoof pick. You know, and I think topicals make us feel better. Absolutely. And some of them are really good for a lot of things. And there's a bajillion different kinds of products out there. But I think if your horse has adequate nutrition, you know, they're maintaining a good body weight, they don't have any other health concerns, you know, the lowered immune system for a variety of reasons, they should be in generally good shape. So yeah, yes, I like pretty polished feet just as much as the next person, but I think a good quality hoof care provider, a good quality diet, and a regular schedule with your hoof care provider. You know, the best hoof care provider in the world can only do their job so well if they only see the animal once a year or twice a year or every 3 months or whatever the case may be. So, you know, definitely work with your professional to develop, and a team of professionals as well, your vet and your farrier and your trainer, to figure out what's going to best fit the needs of your horse. So yeah, as far as topicals go, whatever makes you happy, but there's a lot of them out there, and I think a lot of them could be replaced with a little bit of manual labor. Oh, okay. So yeah, everything I just said. Pick their feet out daily and feed them well. Oh, yep. Okay. So hoof care is often a team approach, which is what I just said. The owner, the rider, the veterinarian, the hoof care professional. And not only that whole team of people, but they have to be able to communicate with one another. If your trainer doesn't get along with your vet and the farrier is just standing there going, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do, that's not a great feedback loop to benefit the horse. Is at the end of the day, it should be about the horse. So, you know, I think being able to communicate effectively on all sides is really important, and being comfortable to ask questions and those kinds of things. Okay. So yeah, the amount of information on the internet. I had a client of mine last week printed me out a whole bunch of stuff that she had found on the internet, and she handed it to me. She's like, I don't know if you're interested, but you know, I found this and it's awesome and it's great. And it was genuinely cool stuff. But just remember that anybody can publish anything on the internet. Oh yeah, I see that. My thoughts on hoof boots. I will get there for sure. I use them. I like them. Okay, yeah. So ensure the accuracy of the information that you're getting. Just because it's on the internet doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And also, something could be working very well in an environment like New Mexico, where those feet are so hard and dry, and that will completely fail in an environment like ours. So, okay. So if you, okay. So so this kind of going back to communication again. I'm sorry that the original point of this presentation was to go back and forth between two people. So if you do have a hoof care concern, or you see something in your horse's foot that you're not sure about, take a picture, clean the foot off really well, take a picture, send it to us, and let us take a look at what is going on. If you have a blurry sideways photo with the horse, the foot's covered in mud, we can't really tell you, but definitely a good clean picture will give us a lot of information. So I saw 2 questions. I don't know if I can go ahead and address those.
You can go ahead, or if we're going to do it later, you can come back to them, whatever you want to do first.
Well, I feel like I've been talking at you guys, so I might as well answer a question.
Yeah, let's answer to it. So the first, can you read them, or you want me to read them out loud?
I saw one about hoof boots and one about oil.
All right, so the first one is, what are your thoughts on hoof boots? We are in Tennessee, and my thoroughbred has soft hooves, and we live in an extremely wet area. My horse is barefoot, and we keep a constant trimming schedule.
Awesome. So I like hoof boots. I do. I'm a Easy Care dealer. They make easy boots. They make those kinds of things. I think the requirements of hoof boots are, they're pretty much for protection of the foot. They don't necessarily provide a lot of support because they're temporary, right? So you're only, hoof boots are only effective while they're on the foot, and horses cannot live in boots, right? They have, even if we're going through something serious like an abscess or laminitis or something like that, boots are still a temporary solution, because the feet it's like any of us trying to wear our shoes for too long, right? Like they sweat, they get gross, they can't live in boots. So boots are effective while they work. So if your horse is very comfortable 99% of the time, except for, when you're riding, then by all means put some hoof boots on. They are different horse shows and things like that. They're not always legal to use then. But there's a variety of boots out there. Some of them are very clunky, and I don't necessarily prefer those. Because I think you kind of mess with your horse's motion a bit. But there's a lot of boots out there, and there's a lot of, they make a variety of sizes pretty much for every type of foot that's out there. So finding the boot that fits your specific horse's foot the best might be a bit of a struggle, and may not necessarily be a money-saving endeavor, right? So depending, and I obviously don't know about your thoroughbred's feet in Tennessee, but I do know that Tennessee is fairly wet. I've spent some time in Kentucky. If they're generally sound and happy on those feet, then that's awesome. If they're constantly, looking for a softer place to walk or to stand, or not getting around very well, they might need protection more often than hoof boots can provide. So that would be a time we would go to something a little bit more permanent, like a horseshoe or something to that effect. Hopefully that helps. If it doesn't, let me know.
I think she's typing again, but we'll go to the oils. How about oils? Do they do anything, or do they just look shiny?
I think I'm going to give you my opinion here. I don't know that they necessarily do much. And I have not been able to find good science or a study that wasn't funded by a company that potentially makes a hoof oil or product to tell me that they're good. I mean, I think people say, oh, my horse's feet are cracking, they're dry. I promise, if you live in New York, your horse's feet aren't dry right now. Like, they might be drier, but they're not that dry. So for me personally, I don't find a lot of value to them. I also don't think that they hurt anything. So they make you feel better and you've had good success with them, absolutely. Hopefully that helps as well.
Right.
Again, feel free to follow up.
And that's the last of the questions for right now. We can go back to the slideshow. I'm sure we'll get more questions as we're going now. All right, preparing for your farrier visit.
Okay, so this was a big one, right? So I had no idea. I've had horses my whole life, and I just, they're in their stalls. What more could you want? A clean, flat workspace is so important. Like, and again, I can only speak for myself personally. A flat, level work surface makes my job so much easier. For whatever reason, an unlevel surface really, really messes with my hips and like halves the number of horses I can do in a day versus if I'm on a level surface. But yeah, make sure your horse is calm. And I like to schedule so I'm not going to be there around feeding time, right? Like if I know that barn feeds at 9 o'clock, I don't want to show up to start working at 9 o'clock because that horse wants breakfast. And everybody's banging and clanging and things like that. So, have their legs and feet clean, picked out. I mean, it's not an absolute necessity, but it does show, it puts some effort in. It's a little bit like brushing your teeth before you go to the dentist, right? Are they not going to help you if you didn't brush your teeth? No, absolutely. They're still going to get your required care. But it's certainly a courtesy, and it makes our job a lot easier. It's really hard on our tools in addition to everything else to work through mud. I mean, I go through a rasp a week as it is, and trying to rasp through mud will dull my rasp out much faster. And unfortunately, when tools get wasted, that's when our jobs become more expensive. So there's something to be said for that as well. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's a lovely grooming stall, farrier workplace. And I understand that not everybody has that, but that's a pretty good environment. Lighting. Oh my goodness, I forgot to talk about lighting. That's a big one. And one of my clients, she might actually be on this call. She did a really cool thing, and I've been sharing it with people because I think it was such an accessible thing, is that she took just regular white, like Christmas lights, and strung them around at about, hip height, kind of where you're bent over height, to provide lighting for the bottoms of their feet versus, we all have these overhead lights that shine down and it's just a shadow and you can't see. So, for the price of some Dollar General string lights, you can make a farrier's visibility so much better. So here's my joke in here with the low-flying aircraft. I was actually in Kentucky working, and we were working on some saddlebreds, and they shoot them in very small spaces anyways. And next thing you know, they're literally landing a helicopter outside. So there's kind of the joke of low-flying aircraft, but it happens, and you try not to come up with ways to get your farrier hurt or yourselves hurt or the horses hurt. Like, just let's keep everybody safe and happy. All right, so again, going through the mud and the tools and whatever, that's the back of my truck at the end of, I don't even remember what day, but it was, muddy day, trimming horses in a field, which is absolutely fine, but it's a pretty good contrast from A to B, and in recognizing that $30 rasp that's in that picture is shot, it's done. Like, I need a new one because it will not cut properly anymore and ends up being more wear and tear on my body. And I can buy a new rasp, but my sore elbows are harder to replace. So yeah, the best possible work environment will get you the best possible healthcare. No, you're good, keep going. Handling the horse for your farrier. So I didn't realize what an individual thing this is. So I can't necessarily give you the best advice on how to hold a horse for your individual hoof care professional. I know how I prefer it done, but definitely discuss that with your chosen professional of how and when and what they would like done. I like people, didn't realize how individual it was. I like everybody to be safe as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so basic tools, and I'm assuming you guys can see me as well as this. If you have shod horses, some ways to pull off shoes are pretty darn important, and you should at least be familiar with, just the same way we know the difference between a stiff brush and a curry comb, right? If you want to go ahead. Okay, so again, a hoof pick, and honestly, spend a little bit of money on them, because you'll get the $2 plastic ones and you'll break them or you'll bend them, and a good stiff brush on the other end is also really helpful in getting that foot clean. Oh yeah, if your horse has thrush or other problems, you might need to be careful. But again, so yeah, so don't be bashful. That's my favorite hoof pick right there. And scrub it, clean it. I mean, we're living in the pandemic life. We know all about cleaning things right now. So get them good and clean. Not going to hurt anything. Oh, hi, Sarah Collier. How do I like my horse to be held? Ideally, I like my horses on cross ties. or straight ties, but cross ties are probably my favorite, because they can't quite turn their head and nip at me quite as much. But I kind of follow the quadrant method of, while I am on the front end of a horse, I want you on the same side as me, and honestly for the back end as well. Do I use stocks? I have successfully managed to avoid working on draft horses. Not all draft horses, but draft horses that would require stocks. I have a few drafts that I work on regularly, and I have not had to put them in stocks. I went to a weekend course on stocks and realized that was not something I wanted to be involved in. So. Okay, so crease nail pullers. Oh, I didn't get a horseshoe, but crease nail pullers are really, really important. I think they're the easiest way to remove a shoe. You literally, it's this little, they bite. You can see mine are bolted into the barn. Stocks, cool. See, I'm getting distracted. I'm sorry. I'll let you read them to me, Brianna. So crease nail pullers, you can literally pull out each individual nail out of a horseshoe, and I think that is basically everybody has the strength to pull one single nail at a time. Not everybody's necessarily going to be able to use a pair of pull-offs and pull off an entire horseshoe without inadvertently torquing the horse's leg or straining themselves in the process. So I think crease nail pullers are pretty darn important, and they're also pretty cost effective. I want to say you can pick up a pair for about $30 and just stick them in the in case of emergency kit, and that way you'll have them. Next. Oh, basic tools. So a rasp. If you wanted to use hoof boots, sometimes your hoof boot won't slide on smoothly because your foot has a little chip or something like that. You can kind of rasp that off. And there's a lot of small writing there that I definitely can't see, but I'm assuming you guys can. So, but yeah, so a handy get.
Okay, I can read it if you want.
That's fine. But I think probably in there it says, as farriers, hoof care providers, whatever, we go through rasps, and generally, if you ask us, we can give you an old rasp, which is they'll be done for our using purposes, but there'll be more than enough rasp to get a horse owner through the rest of their equestrian career. So. Okay, so removing a shoe. So this is one of my dear darling thoroughbreds, who stepped on the inside heel of his shoe. So you can see where the inside branch of that horseshoe is pulled down away from his foot. That is called a sprung shoe or a sprung heel. And the best thing for me to do at this point, or as a horse owner to do, is to pull that shoe off of his foot. And you can use your crease nail pullers and pull out each nail individually. You can use your pull-offs, something like that. And again, I'm going to go back to, this is why it's important to pick your horse's feet a bunch, because if you spend a lot of time picking their feet, they're going to be more cooperative, and you as a person are going to be more adept at getting in and around your horse's feet should you have to do something like pull a shoe or wrap a foot for an abscess or things like that. You know, there's, with the crease nail puller, I can't see the rest of that question. You'll have to read it to me. But yeah, being able to pull a shoe is important. So.
And for that question, we have Morgan. With the crease nail pullers, do you not need to bend the nails up on the exterior of the wall first? We always bent the nails up first on the exterior before picking up the horse's foot and pulling it.
Absolutely. So those are clinches. And that is the like traditional pony club way to do it, is to call it cut your clinches. So they're folded over and you pop them up to straighten them, or some people rasp them off or something like that. I find with crease nail pullers, I don't have to do that. If there's another way, farrier is just like the rest of the horse world. For every opinion and experience, you will have an equal and opposite opinion and experience, and they will both be completely effective. So find what works. But yes, Pony Club likes you to cut your clinches.
We had somebody ask to go back to this slide for a moment. Did you get what you wanted out of that? Or do you have a question about the pull-offs? Judy? Oh, wait.
Fun little fact about pull-offs is they will always have these little knobs at the end. So if you're, ever looking at a farrier's box or something like that, you will know that you are grabbing the pull-offs, which are about $60, versus the nippers, which the head of them look very similar, but they won't have these knobs on the end, and the nippers are about $260. So you don't want to confuse those two.
All right, so the next slide, there is a video. I'm gonna hope that it plays.
Oh, we're using crease nail pullers. I got a phone call in the middle there. Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay. It's so short. I'll play it again for everyone to kind of see what's going on.
All right. I love bell boots almost as much as I love a hoof pick. Because I think they're hand in hand farrier's best friends. So bell boots can be extremely helpful in keeping shoes on, but they have to be fit appropriately. And so your image on the left there is going to be a bell boot that fits appropriately. And on the right is going to be a bell boot that's obviously too small. So, and it's too small in terms of helping keep the shoe on the foot. It would still be effective in protecting the heel bulbs if that's your goal. But if the goal is to, help keep the horse from stepping off a shoe, you need something that covers the circumference of the hoof. And I even go so far as some of the really cool, like ballistic nylon no-turn bell boots are awesome at protecting heel bulbs. Like they're great. There's so much tough material there. So if your horse overreaches, it's not going to hurt itself. But there's no coverage on the side. So if your horse can very easily step off an inside branch for sure. So not all bell boots are created equally. That's all I'm saying. Oh, this is a good one. So does my horse need shoes? There is no one answer to this question. I will say that probably 80% of the horses that I work on are barefoot, but I do shoe plenty of horses, and it's so very dependent on the individual and sometimes the individual hoof. I had some really interesting horses that they all did the same job. They lived in the same environment. They ate the same thing. And most of those horses were thriving barefoot and successful and all those things. And they had a couple that really just, their feet just weren't. Hi, Marilyn. I live in Ballston Spa, New York. So, you know, their feet are cracking and chipping and have chronic thrush and, you know, minor abscessing, things like that. And that to me, I was like, these horses need to be shod. And it was a really interesting conversation to have with the owner and the trainer, because they're like, well, why? All the other horses are doing so well. And that's really not for me to figure out. Like, that's just, things happen, and there's variables outside of our control. So treating every horse and every situation individually, I think, is the best way to answer that question. I'm gonna see if I can lean in and read this too. So reasons to shoe a horse. So traction is a huge one. And then we had talked about protection versus support with talking about hoof boots and things like that. And also therapeutic reasons. So I feel like that's a really generic term, therapeutic shoeing, right? But I consider it anything other than an open-heeled shoe would be a therapeutic horseshoe application. And I think when a horse needs either traction, protection, or therapy, more often than it doesn't, that's an appropriate time to shoe a horse. So if you go on a rocky trail ride once every month, and the rest of the time your horse is fine and comfortable and living his best life barefoot, then hoof boots are a fantastic option. If your horse is not thriving and might benefit from support, protection, or traction more often, then horseshoes are a good option. And there's a lot of different kinds of shoes out there, whether we're talking steel, aluminum, polyurethane. I mean, the shoes in the lower left-hand corner there, they're actually the front part of the shoe is a standard steel shoe, and the back is a whole flip-flop pad to really give a lot of flexibility to the back third of the foot. So I didn't necessarily touch on this maybe when we first started talking about anatomy, but the back half of the foot, the back 2/3 of the foot is all soft tissue. All the bone, your P3, everything is in the front part of the foot. So it's, generally speaking, if you're going to want either stability or mobility, it's going to be in the back half of the foot. So the lower right-hand corner picture is a heart bar shoe. And that horse really benefited from having stability added to the back of its foot. Whereas the pictures on the lower left-hand corner is an example of giving a horse mobility in the back of its foot. And it's sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's a good diagnosis from a veterinarian to figure out what structures we are aiding and in making the horse more comfortable.
Hey, Ashley, you have a question. Is
Sure.
there any thumb rule about hoof wall length relative to HPA?
Ooh, somebody. So HPA would be hoof pastern axis or hoof pastern angle. And in terms of hoof wall length, there's a lot of people have a lot of rules of thumbs, and some people, I mean, I have really small hands, but I know farriers who, like, you know, they'll measure a dorsal wall using, you know, literally their thumb or something to that effect. I think anytime you say always or never, you're going to be wrong. So as far as a general guideline, I can't really give you. I do a lot of my job on feel, and this is where it would be easy for me to pass off to a different farrier who measures everything and does toe lengths and angles and things like that. And I'm just a little bit more, I don't want to say I fly by the seat of my pants, because that doesn't mean that I put more thought into it than that, but I'm not a numbers brain. So like an excessively long foot is generally speaking, is going to drop your pastern. It's gonna be a lower angle. Shortening your toe is gonna raise your angle. Those are kind of cut and dry. but there will always be exceptions to that. So I think I did a terrible job of dancing around your question, but hopefully that helped a little bit.
All right. And I think you take a holistic approach.
Okay, I like it. That's better than numbers scare me, because that's kind of that's the real truth of it. So I had talked about boots before. If we think we need to keep going into this, I think having an appropriately fit boot is really, really important. And also try them before you decide you're going to go on your amazing weekend camping trip in your hoof boots. You don't want to end up with your horse having a rub or it not being the right fit for the situation, and have that be a problem. So, try it in a contained environment first. I know personally, I was, in the middle of galloping across a field, and the boot didn't come fully flying off. It stayed attached around the pastern, and my ride got very, very interesting. So retrospectively, it may have been beneficial to introduce my horse to something wrapped around its pastern first. Things like that. Oh, okay. So there's no live horse demo because, Zoom, but we did use my big thoroughbred to do some shoe pulling. And so I think it's talking about shoe pulling and also hoof wrapping. Those are both good skills to practice before you need to do them, because you're never more stressed out than when your horse is abscessing and lame and in pain, and you're like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with my baby, right? And then you're trying to figure out duct tape and diapers and Epsom salt, and holy goodness, and the whole thing is just super overwhelming. So practice now when it's a random Thursday and the sun's out and it's easy. And then you have all this stuff and you have it set away in a little bag stuck in the corner somewhere, and you got it and you don't have to worry about it. And maybe the next time your farrier's out, if they are willing, your horse is shod, have them pull a shoe, or if you have the tools, pull your shoes before your farrier gets there. And again, practice in a low stress environment, because on the side of the trailer at a horse show is the worst place to be trying to wrestle a shoe off a foot.
Is there maybe a brief, quick list of supplies that you're like, every horse owner should have this in regards to their feet? I know when I was on the farm, it was duct tape and Epsom salt and things like that. But what are things that you would list off must have, other than what we talked about, hoof pick and things like that?
Must haves. So I would say a disinfectant of some kind, whether it's your traditional thrush medicine or your betadine or chlorhexidine or whatever. So a disinfectant, a drawing agent, be that your Epsom salt or your Ixamol or something like that, a poultice, anything that kind of has that drawing ability to it. I really like diapers for wrapping. I'm definitely the KISS method, the keep it simple. I'm a big fan of, you can put their foot down and wrap a diaper around it very quickly. Duct tape is always good to have in a barn, or I don't know how people live without it. So please have duct tape. Is Epsom salt useful to treat an abscess? It sure can be. Let me finish my one thought though. So I also, in terms of wrapping, even if you're not necessarily looking into hoof boots for riding, I think having a hoof boot is not a terrible idea, because generally when you have to wrap a foot, it's not just for one day. It's you have to wrap them today and tomorrow and next week and whatever. And if you just have a boot that even is too big, it will still work, because you can throw your duct tape or your Epsom salt and your duct tape or whatever diaper on and then stick a boot over the top, and it saves you a lot of work in that regard. So your hoof pick, all your regular tools, a disinfectant, a drawing agent, and some ways to wrap a foot. I get really careful with vet wrap, because you can over tighten it, and you can tighten and tighten and tighten it around a hoof. It's a solid structure, you're not going to hurt it. But if you start getting up to the cornet band and up to your pastern, you can constrict, just like a regular bandage bow or things like that, and you can cause issues. So I'm not a huge vet wrapper on feet, unless you're pretty darn comfortable doing it. Oh, what else should people? I think that about covers it. So Epsom salt, was that the question?
Is Epsom salt useful to treat an abscess?
I think anything can be. What I like about Epsom salt is it osmotic pressure, right? So it changes osmotic pressure. God, goodness, use my words here. It will help pull things out of the foot because everything moves from high to low. And it also is really good for soreness. So it can work like that. You can make, your little Epsom salt paste with some betadine, something like that. The tincture of thyme is what kicks abscesses in the butt, if you ask me, is, when getting them to pop or blow or whatever you want to call it is your first goal. And then, keeping them clean and keeping that area flushed to keep it from redeveloping. So another thing with abscesses, I don't always like bye Amy. I don't always like necessarily having the animal on antibiotics because it can knock down the infection just enough that the abscess subsides, and we all think the horse is better. And then in 2 weeks or 2 months or whenever that abscess kicks back up, it comes back. So I like to be over cautious with abscesses. So my own horse abscessed, one of them abscessed last fall, and I soaked him in Epsom salt and betadine, if that helps.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, what are your thoughts about hoof packing when putting on full pads with shoeing? I have heard variable things.
Okay. I know I don't say always or never, but I cannot currently think of a time where I have not put packing of some kind under a pad. And I generally prep my foot, I clean it out really well, and I'll add some kind of antimicrobial product. There's a lot of them out there. Some of them are more caustic, some of them are less caustic. But I think having an antimicrobial product of some variety in between the pad and the shoe, or the foot in the foot in the pad and the packing in the pad and all those things is critically important, because feet really can get pretty darn gross under a pad. And I believe that something is going to get under that pad, and I would just as soon have it be something that I put in there. So I the vast majority of the time put packing under my pads.
Okay. Are there any other questions out there? Well, again, I just want to say thank you for everyone for coming. I think that this is
cool. I can see you guys now. Sorry.
This has been an interesting adaptation to our horse symposium, and it's given us an opportunity to reach a larger community, which is nice. But also we aren't in our hands-on experience that you can get when we're in person either. So there's good and bad to it, but we are so happy to have you join us. Just so you know, Cornell Cooperative Extension Equine, as we call it, CCE Equine, is in Saratoga County, part of Saratoga County Extension's Cornell Cooperative Extension Office. We are a program that is dedicated to education and helping the equine community with their needs in our area, which is the capital region of New York State. I know it's interesting because we are actually getting people out of state with this program. Exciting. Thank you for all you out-of-staters for coming. You should look us up, follow us on Facebook, or follow our website. You can get on there too. We have a lot of information and about our program and other programs we have. So thank you, Ashley, for the great presentation, a lot of information. If you have any questions, you can email me. That my email is what sent out the link for this Zoom. So you have that, and I can link you with resources that you are looking for. So I don't see any other questions specifically for you, Ashley. Just thank yous. And thank you, Ashley. I'm going to be closing the meeting.
All right, bye guys. Thanks for coming.
Maybe.